possible that this was terrorist related, but we don't know. It's also possible that this was workplace related.
That was President Obama earlier today, recognizing the possibility of yesterday's shooting being terror-related. Aren't we lucky? And now reports indicate the shooters Syed Farook and Tashfeen Malik were communicating with terrorists, and both were radicalized. For more, we are joined by Ambassador R. James Woolsey, former Director of Central Intelligence, current chairman at the Leadership Council for the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and he is also chancellor for the Institute of World Politics. Thank you for joining us today. So we now know the shooter traveled to, thank you. We now know the shooter traveled to Saudi Arabia and was completely radicalized. My question to you is, how much of an ISIS or extremist Islam influence does that country have?
Well, the ideology that one can pick up there, as well as in other parts of the Gulf, I think, from radical imams and the like, can be an extremely harsh version of Islam, Wahhabism. There are others in Saudi Arabia, but that is the state religion. There's been a close alliance between the royal family and the Wahhabis going back to the 18th century. So I think that we have a serious problem, and exactly how much of his radicalization came about because he was in Saudi Arabia or because of something that happened to him there, it's hard to say.
Well, let me ask you this, because I mean, just to be really blunt, how did we miss this guy? I mean, the FBI is stating that they are overwhelmed because they have so many cases right now in the United States that they're trying to investigate. I mean, there's investigations going on in all 50 states. And to watch these people around the clock 24/7 is a lot. I mean, it takes a lot of resources. So this guy wasn't even on the radar screen, Ambassador.
That's what I understand from the press reports. He was an American citizen. He had a good job. He traveled to Saudi Arabia apparently, but that's perfectly legal for Americans to do. I don't know of any indication that the purchase of the gun was illegal. I presume it was done by him. It may have been done by someone else. But any of the no history that I've heard of mental illness or anything like that. So you know, there's no trigger there that would get somebody to say, better keep an eye on this guy. I understand that there were a number of men looking as if they're from the Near East that came and went from his and his wife's residence, and that got some neighbors interested and concerned, and one or more of them thought about making a phone call to the police or otherwise, but they didn't want to be called an Islamophobe. They didn't want to be politically incorrect. At some point,
but
here,
Ambassador,
decide whether or not they can put up with being politically incorrect in the interests of their security.
But Ambassador, let me ask you a question. I mean, because if you connect the dots going backwards, right? When you say about, you know, there was nothing jumping out at us. I don't know. I mean, first of all, if we strip away political correctness, right? We have a gentleman who traveled abroad to Pakistan and to Saudi Arabia. We have a gentleman who everybody said was starting to change his appearance. He's online through social media, connecting with people who are known terrorists or terrorist groups. How did we not put that together? And what about the guns were actually purchased legally? So, I mean, and thousands of rounds. I mean, what else do we need?
Well, it may have depended on the social media connections. If he was connected up on social media with someone who had a very radical background, that could have been a useful signal and something that should have been tracked down before we had the flap about 2 years ago with respect to metadata, because now under the Snowden, post-Snowden regulations, metadata is not preserved. That is, the records of his calls to someone else, not the substance of the calls, but just the fact of the call, who it was from and who it was to. That can't be preserved by the government anymore. It has to be preserved, and will probably be only preserved very briefly by the telephone companies. So this could have been a case. It's speculative. We don't know yet. But this could have been a case in which the post-Snowden reforms have begun to undercut our ability to quickly find out who someone who is suspicious
Ambassador, I'm going to have to cut you off on that.
With.
Ambassador, thank you, Ambassador. It's great analysis. I will have to cut you off at that. I want to tell the audience, we want to hear from you. So go to newsmax.com/comments and tell us what you think about what the ambassador just said. Newsmax Prime continues right after this.